As we're planning our remote learning, there's lots of things that we have to consider. And one of them, one of the sets of tools that we can use to help students remember is to pull in some of these brain-friendly strategies. You know, some of these things that we can do as learners that are really optimized for the brain, that it's like learning the way that the brain craves to learn. And if we want ideas to stick, if we want learning to really, really stick, especially for the long term, there's a handful of practices that we can use, whether we're face-to-face or remote. But they definitely work with remote too. And so to talk about that, I've got a guest that is going to share lots and lots of practical ideas and some things that you can use in your classroom that fit really, really well with this. So I want to welcome you into the video today. We're talking strategies for powerful remote learning. And my name's Matt Miller. I'm the author of Ditch That Textbook and the owner of this channel, the one who runs this channel. And so today I've got Pooja Agarwal, who is going to, she's done, well, you know what, I'm just going to turn it over to you and let you tell everybody, because, you know, really whenever we think about these kinds of topics, this is my go-to person. So Pooja, do you want to tell the people a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Pooja Agarwal. I am a cognitive scientist. So I have been doing research on how students learn and remember information from school, from class, from the world for about 15 years. I'm also a teacher. I teach about 80 college students in Boston at the Berklee College of Music. I teach science at a music school, which is pretty phenomenal and a lot of fun. So I love talking about research behind how we can make sure everything sticks. Otherwise, you know, if students are going through school and classes and we learn stuff in the short term, but it doesn't stick in the long term, I'm really focused on how can we get that information to stick in the long term. And so I love talking with Matt about how we can integrate technology and what this means in the classroom. And so I'm really excited to be here today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell you what, that book over her left shoulder, which I happen to have a copy of right here, is full of all sorts of practical ideas that she and her co-author Patrice Bain have pulled together and have shared so generously, and so many of them fit so well for remote learning. So I wanted to say, if you're watching this video and you're watching it live, welcome. We're really glad to have you and would love to have you participate in the conversation. So there is the comment box, the chat box. So feel free to write any questions that you have at any point. But also, if we're talking about something and you have your own ideas to share or your own suggestions or things that you've done in your own classroom, please do share those with us. And then again, if you're live, we'd love for you to drop your information into the chat box real quick. Tell us who you are, where you're from, what you do, so pop those onto the screen and say hello to you. If you're watching this on the replay, then you are in store for all sorts of ideas. We're going to be sharing them out with you from the brains of your hosts and as well as the people that are watching. So there'll be a lot to show. So looking forward to the conversation. And so Pooja, so we could just kind of get started with this, get into this. There really are, kind of like what I was saying in the introduction, there really are lots of these sort of brain-friendly practices that we can use when we teach, and they're not just relegated to the classroom. They fit really well for remote learning too, right?
Yeah, everything we talk about, Patrice Bain and I, that we mentioned in Powerful Teaching, works really well online. One of the basics that Matt and I will be sharing is a strategy called Retrieval Practice. And this is a simple sort of idea or a foundation for learning, which is intuitive, but we can be more mindful and intentional about it, where retrieval, to really encourage students to pull information out of their heads, instead of just putting information into their heads. So instead of cramming or reading a textbook, we really want students to practice what they know and to pull that information out, and that helps promote student learning. We've got more than 100 years of research from K-12 to college to graduate school to medical school to older adults demonstrating across different subject areas that simple retrieval or pulling information out really improves that long-term learning. And so the strategies we share and the strategies that Matt and I will talk about apply just as well online because of that basic foundation. It's nothing fancy, it's nothing new, it's just thinking about how we can do more of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I love about this for remote learning is that it's very equitable, it's very low tech, and it's really easy to get in everybody's hands. And we're going to get into some of that as we go. I'm seeing that we've got lots of folks here watching. So wanted to do a couple of shout outs real quick. Hello to Jamie from Austin, Texas. Annette's here from Canada. Katie is here from Ontario, Canada. Katie's a regular in these videos, by the way. Kristen is excited to see Pooja, which is awesome. RC from Quebec City. Good to see you. We've got Allison here from Plymouth, Mass. We've got Reba is here from Dallas, so it's good to see her. Jennifer from Houston. Carol from Shallow Texas. Hello, welcome to the video. Haley is here from Alberta, Canada. Man, Canada is representing here. This is great. Dana from Ohio. Cody from Pennsylvania. We've got Cindy. Yep, Cindy from Lubbock, Texas. Lots of Texans in here today. So we keep going on and on and on. And it's good to see all of you in this video. Wow, there's a bunch of folks here. So
Nicaragua.
What was that?
Nicaragua. There's someone joining from Nicaragua.
Oh my goodness, I missed that. I was just flipping through. Wow, we're going outside of the United States. That's awesome. So, all right, and from the UK as well. And Stephanie loves powerful teaching. So, there you go. All right, so it's good to see all of everyone here. So, let's sort of start with retrieval practice, which is very much in your wheelhouse, I know. So with your own students that you teach on the university level, and I know that a lot of this transfers over to the K-12 level, of course, too. What are some of those basic practices that you've found transfers over really well from the classroom, the face-to-face classroom, into the remote learning classroom that we could potentially use ourselves?
One of the most basic, so in my online classes or remote learning classes now, I use Zoom. One of the most basic things I love to do is to ask a simple question. It can be about class content. It could be a trivia fact just to get students kind of warmed up, and to just have them type in the chat. And exactly like how it's working for us right now on this live stream and your comments, there's something interactive about encouraging students to use the chat. And even if they're typing in answers and they can see each other's answers and one can type in before the other one, using that chat is such a great feature to get all students involved in interacting. I would encourage you to use some kind of question that really isn't too meaty, some sort of basic question. So an example of kind of a trivia fact I recently asked my students that is in Powerful Teaching, so I won't tell you the answer, or you can type in the chat if you know the answer, is how many bones are in the adult human body? And me and my students were just talking about memory and learning and how retrieval helps. So I wanted to emphasize that having them pull that information out will help them learn just kind of this random fact about the number of bones in the human body. So you can type that into the chat as well. Matt and I can sort of model all of these strategies for you in terms of how easy and interactive they can be. So if you know the answer, don't Google it, don't cheat. Matt and I aren't grading you. You can type
Right.
in the number of bones in the human body. That's
All
one
right.
of the simplest, Matt.
There's our first response right there. How close is this?
We'll wait. We'll see some other.
Okay, you want to collect some of them?
Yeah.
Okay, so Reba says 206. RC says 306. Sarah says 200.
Oh, I do the same thing in the classroom when students are retrieving and pulling information out. I don't always go with the first response, right? I let a few students chime in before then providing the answer or giving some feedback. That way a lot more students can jump in. It's not just that first student who gets things right. And I love that you're guessing. I love that.
Yeah. I used to use a sort of a little text back channel feature in my class to get students to do the same kind of thing in person. There's a tool called Today's Meet. It doesn't exist anymore. But what I would have them do is I would have them type in what they wanted to say, and I'd say, leave it there. Don't hit enter yet, but go ahead and type it in. And I would go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, hit enter.
Like
and
that.
then all of them would start coming in at the same time.
That's a great idea. I'm going to have to try that in my classes tomorrow.
There you go. There you go. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so it looks like the consensus here is that there's 206 bones in the human body. And so now we've gotten to interact. We've gotten to type in some things into the chat, of course, which is half of the fun, right? And then yeah, we've done a little bit of retrieving too.
Yeah. Yep. Another strategy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another one I use often are just the simple polls. So WebEx has polls. I use Zoom polls. And Matt and I are really excited to chat about what I call retrieval warm-ups. And so warm-ups, just like you warm up for exercise,
Right.
It is getting warmed up for class, getting students retrieving. But also these warm-ups help reduce anxiety and help build community by sharing more information about ourselves in a very low stakes way. So one of my favorite warm-ups that you can type into the chat is, what was your favorite breakfast as a kid? So go ahead and type that into the chat. What was your favorite breakfast as a kid? And that's an example of a warm-up where we pull information out in everyday life, but too often in-person remote learning, it's like, oh my gosh, you want me to do what? You're asking me a question? I don't know the answer, and now I feel put on the spot. But something like, what's your favorite breakfast as a kid? We all have our own experiences that we can share. And so I have materials, I'll pull these up on the share screen. I have a whole list of retrieval warm-ups that you can download. And so on my website, retrievalpractice.org, I've already got it pulled up. You can go to retrievalpractice.org/library, or if you're on the home page, you go to downloads and then free practice guides. And if you scroll down, I've got a number of resources about book club discussion questions for my book and for my colleague's book, Make It Stick. I've got 6 free guides that we'll talk about in 5 different languages and free professional development slides. And so right here are the retrieval practice warm-ups. They're all free, you can download them, and they're all these no stakes questions. So what is your least favorite ice cream flavor? Would you rather go 100 years into the past or 100 years in the future? I think that's one of my favorite questions for any age group. If you're teaching 4th grade or you're teaching college, you'd be surprised. It's a really fun question to chat about. Would you rather own a sailboat or a hot air balloon? There's my breakfast question. So these warm-ups can be done in the polls. You could turn them into multiple choice questions. So simply, would you rather own a sailboat or a hot air balloon? And you give those 2 options, you take a quick vote, and then you can have a class discussion. And this really doesn't have to take more than a minute of class. I like using it, especially as students are joining. When my college students, they kind of straggle in a little bit, just like in person. So they can be some fun retrieval warm-ups to emphasize we do this in everyday life.
Yeah. And speaking of those retrieval warm-ups, we've got lots of answers to the favorite breakfast as a child. So we've got a cream of wheat, McDonald's pancakes. That does sound pretty good to me too. We've got cinnamon.
I haven't had breakfast yet, and it's 11:15 my time.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. See, it was a bowl of Cheerios this morning. Me too, just like Heather. So we've got oatmeal, we've got Alphabet cereal, Fruit Loops, Corn Flakes, Cheerios, waffles, eggs over easy, Golden Grams, lots of things here. Fruity Pebbles, cinnamon rolls, French toast, and not just French toast, but grandma's French toast. Love it. So lots and lots of options here. Loving this. This is great. I wanted to ask you a quick question about this. Sure. I believe in the power of what we're doing with this warm-up and getting students interacting and asking these kinds of things. For the skeptic who might look at this and say, look, you know, this doesn't specifically, explicitly tie into my standards. Why am I asking my students something like this? What would you say to them?
I love that. And that's a completely understandable concern. I have the same concern sometimes. You know, I'm taking class time and I'm not really, when I'm talking about breakfast as a kid, we're not talking about psychology or neuroscience. But for me, I think of this not so much as a trade-off, but as something that will help students learn more. So it's sort of using your time more effectively, using your time more wisely. If you build this culture of retrieval, and it's not too late in the semester to do this, if you're building that culture, then you can start using retrieval more and more often, and students will get comfortable with that feeling of pulling information out. If we're focused on just getting information in, just focusing on those standards, if we pull information out in all of 2 minutes, it took us 2 minutes right here on this video with Matt, then students will be getting more out of their educational experience. Research backs that up. My own experience backs that up, that when we foster norms and culture. We do this in our classrooms from day one with a lot of different ways that we set rules and guidelines and norms. And this is just one other way to build community and do that. So it may not be directly related to your standards, but students will understand and soak in more of that information that is related to their standards.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's very well said. Absolutely. We did have a question come in, so we can kind of you can take this or we can take this together or whatever. You had mentioned Zoom. And so, of course, you know, somebody's going to ask, and Cynthia, you know, fair enough question, very fair question at this point. What about the privacy issues with the Zoom? Since you were talking about using it, you know, how have you sort of, just personally at least, how have you sort of worked through your decision to continue to use it?
I personally, with Zoom, is all password protected for us, and I haven't experienced Zoom bombing yet, so I don't have that issue. And we do record all of our Zoom sessions, especially to make them available online, again, password protected. At my school at the Berklee College of Music in Boston, 40% of my students are English language learners, and most of them have all traveled home. So I just spoke with a student right before this who's in Spain right now. And I have students in Mexico and China and Korea and Italy and all over the place. And so I also have time zone challenges. And so we do record our classes. Students can watch them. For my English language learners, they can watch. It's got the auto transcript, but it's all password protected. I also use a lot of Google Forms, and for that, students have to be logged into their Berklee email account. So in terms of their privacy, I feel that it's all password secured, and Berklee has sent out some guidelines about privacy as well.
Okay, very good. That sounds fantastic. Now, since you did mention Google Forms just now, I know we were talking about this a little bit off air, that Google Forms is one of many ways that you can use to do some retrieval practice. So I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about how you use that in your class.
Yes. So I, in my classes before remote learning, was giving retrieval practices on paper and pencil, and there'd be about 20 minutes at the start of class, followed by discussion. And I talk a lot in Powerful Teaching about challenges and the time trade-offs, but I don't think of them as trade-offs. But I did do them in person in class. And I mentioned in passing in the book that I've always wanted to explore moving my retrieval practices online so that I would have more time in class. And so with our switch or shift to remote learning, I now use Google Forms for my weekly retrieval practices. And I'm going to actually show you one of my retrieval practices that my students just completed this week. And so they're just pretty simple. They take me no more than an hour to put together. You'll see that I have the deadline at the top, and I've got some reminders. I intentionally leave all the questions optional. That way, if some of my students can't remember or aren't comfortable answering them, they can leave them blank. I do ask, for instance, what's one thing you learned in class? And I say right here to challenge yourself and make sure to retrieve, okay? And I've got other questions like students from their books, if you're having lunch with the author, what would you ask them? And then I've got sort of a conditional that I've learned from all of Matt's great tools on Google Forms. So students in my classes read one of 4 books, then they have a question specific to their book. So that's the one about choking under pressure. There's this great book about cognitive psychology called Invisible Gorilla, and so on. So everyone gets sort of a different question. And then I've got it set up where they all have the same last page. And here's where I ask an important question called metacognition. So meta, that's so meta is sort of being bigger than the thing you're talking about. So metacognition is cognating about your cognition. It's thinking about your own thinking. And a lot of research I and my colleagues have done shows that taking that added step, so retrieving, pulling information out, but then asking students, how confident are you in how you just did on this retrieval? On my in-person ones, I had check boxes, nailed it or not sure next to every question. But for this, I just have one. So in general, did you kind of nail this retrieval sort of halfway, 5 points or 0 points? And you'll see here I've got my warm-up. I have it at the end of my retrieval practices, not at the beginning. Honestly, that's just because I'm used to it. I've had students suggest that I should do research where for some retrievals, I put them at the front, at the top, and some of my retrievals, I put them at the bottom. But there's my question of the week, which animal would make a good musician? And then I do have a sort of academic honesty policy at the end. And then students submit. And what I have set up as well is, I don't know that it'll work for now, but I have it set up so that students can then see each other's answers after they submit.
Oh, yeah.
And then that way, and so that way they can kind of get feedback from each other. Maybe they're interested. And so one thing I did just yesterday in my classes is I asked my students for feedback. Since my students currently had in-person for the first half of the semester, and now have it remote, I asked them, do they prefer the in-person written quizzes or do they prefer these Google Forms? And I interestingly got a 50-50 split. So half of my students said they like the Google Forms because they can take their time. I've noticed that they actually type a lot more than they write. So I get richer responses on Google Forms.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And they like being able to do those at home. But then I also had students say, well, I like having them in class because I forget to fill them out online. And I like having them in class because then it is time to kind of go silent and be calm and collected and just silently think before we start class. With everything else going on in the day, they would come into my class and that's the first thing we'd do for 20 minutes is silent writing. So I'm not yet sure. I'd love some thoughts in the chat maybe. If you're using something similar online versus in person, it's something I'm still thinking about for my following semesters. So that's one of the ways I do retrieval. I've talked about the warm-ups, the polls. I've got these Google Forms that students complete before class.
Yeah, yeah. So let's get back. And I realized that we may not have done very much of a deep dive into exactly what retrieval is. I mean, you touched on it a little bit at the beginning, but I thought that maybe now might be a good time to do that. And also some of the really simple ideas that you've got for squeezing this into class just with a simple question. Some of those examples, I can think of a couple of them off the top of my head. See, I'm retrieving them.
Yeah.
Some of those is simple examples of just like little one-off questions that you can throw at students that will help them dive down through their brain to try to get that information. I thought maybe we could touch on that a little bit real quick.
One of my favorite questions for that, and you saw it on my retrieval practice, is just asking students, what's something you remember from class last week? That's it. It's completely open-ended.
Yeah.
There are a lot of responses, so there's not really a right answer. And I love the idea, Matt, that I could ask students that live during Zoom, what's one thing you remember from our last class, having them type, but then hitting the send button all at the same time. I love that because then it's just kind of fun to see the whole scroll in the chat. Yeah. So questions like that, what do you remember from class last week? What's one question you have that you want to discuss today? That even asking students to retrieve information about today is going to be helpful, because they're still going to have to sort of mentally time travel back. Like, what was something that was unclear from the last class that I want to talk about today? And all of these questions, again, focusing on getting information out, don't have to take any prep. And importantly, they don't have to take any grading. You don't have to grade the retrieval Google Forms. You don't have to grade what people put in the chats. I didn't grade you on your favorite breakfast, right? And sometimes in-person and remote learning, we have this feeling that, well, they retrieved, so I have to record that and I have to put it in the grade book, and we don't have to do that at all. And so not only are these no prep prompts, but they're no grading prompts as well, which I think are really important for all of us as teachers.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, I'm glad.
I totally agree with you. I wanted to put that one.
Yeah, thanks. I see Catalina said that we use Microsoft Teams and you can create polls. That's great to know. I haven't used Microsoft Teams yet. Matt, I saw that you just tweeted some tips about Microsoft Teams.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's lots of great stuff that you can do there with the video built in, and then like Catalina said about the polls and all. If you've got Office products, then having Teams, that's a really easy way to connect to all of this. So, and I thought that was such an important point that you made, and I hope I didn't oversimplify it in the little banner below that. I think that's super important. And I found it in my own classes too, helping students to learn Spanish, that, whenever you do it this way and you encourage students to retrieve, to try to call that information out of their brains, it starts to create that habit, doesn't it? It's that study habit that we want students to own, instead of it being an obligation of something they have to do for points. And it really does become less an assessment and more a study tool, right?
Yep. Yeah, you can think of retrieval practice as formative assessment for us as teachers, but it's formative assessment for students. They get to see, how well am I learning this information? Do I got it? Do I not? Do I have it? Do I not have it? And so that formative assessment for students is an added component of them, as you said, Matt, owning this process, owning their process of their own learning. It's not just the teacher's responsibility, it's the student's responsibility as well.
Yeah, definitely. We had a couple of really good comments come in here. Tracy says, I have a math teacher who's using forms as an assessment piece for her virtual class now. Love this. I'm going to call her after this session to add the retrieval piece. There you go. Nicely done, Tracy.
Yeah. And I see Darcy's question. I love that. I took a screenshot so I don't forget. I love this.
This is good. If I missed our last class, what would be the most important thing to tell me? That's brilliant. I love that one.
I'm going to put that on my retrieval practice for next week. I am.
Oh, nice. There you go. All right.
Yep.
Just taught the teacher. This is great.
Kristen, I'm always looking for feedback and teaching tips, as we all are for teachers. We're all here with Matt joining because we all want to learn more strategies, more tips. We're hungry for anything we can do, and that includes me.
Yep. There you go. And then Reba says this is a great connection that is a need a lot of students need right now, that are a distance from each other. So yeah, really love this. So man, we've touched on a lot just in a short amount of time here. So as we wrap up, do you have any last thoughts or parting wisdom or any tips that we didn't get out that you want to leave with everyone?
Oh gosh, there are all those things. I guess I'll say that I would love for you to join me and continue the conversation. I'm on Twitter at RetrieveLearn. You can subscribe for emails at retrievalpractice.org. Matt and I have been collaborating now, Matt, for years.
Yes.
And so keep your eyes peeled, because I'm sure Matt and I will be up to a lot of things. But yeah, follow on Twitter. Do subscribe for my emails, retrievalpractice.org. Tomorrow, fingers crossed, I'm going to be announcing a brand new download. I'm going to tell you here first. It's a metacognition guide. So even more tips, research, information, strategies about thinking about our own thinking, having students think about their own learning. So I've got a brand new guide. I'm going to be releasing it tomorrow. So make sure to subscribe at retrievalpractice.org.
Yeah, definitely retrieve there. Subscribe there. I'm getting all my words mixed up here. And this library that we just were talking about earlier, I put that banner back up just because all of those downloads, there are so many practical things that you can insert into your learning. If you've ever felt like, this is my take on this, if you've ever felt like the way that you're trying to help your students learn for the long term, if it feels like it's just going in one ear and out the other ear, if it doesn't feel like it's sticking, these are the kinds of little practical things, classroom tested things that you can start putting into practice right away. And all of these downloads are so generously free. And so I would definitely suggest that. And then Pooja didn't ask me to do this, but I'm going to hold her up one more time, just because this, I tell you what, this is one of my favorite teaching books, just because it has all of these practical things that you can insert into class that don't take hardly any time. And they're the way they're practices that are wired the way that your brain is wired. You know, they're kind of built that way. And so we touched mostly on retrieval practice during this video, but there are so many other ones in that book too. So, you know, definitely do check that out.
I guess I'll mention, Matt, there's sort of 4 power tools, 4 strategies we focus on. Then we've got chapters on sort of actual challenges in our classroom. What does this mean? How do we include them? How do we grade? We've got chapters about how do you have conversations with parents and students to get them on board. And then we've got 2 full chapters on facilitating your own free professional development.
Oh.
So there's a lot in there in that book. Patrice Spain, my co-author, is a K-12 teacher, and she and I have been collaborating for 15 years, and this book came out, and we're so thrilled to share it. So powerful teaching. Yes,
powerful teaching. This one, I'm going to leave us with this last comment. This one cracked me up. Looking forward to that new guide. Excellent. All right. Well, Pooja, again, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing some of the wisdom out of your book, out of your brain, out of your practice, so that we can benefit from it. If you've watched this on the live or on the replay, we certainly do thank you for watching. And if you want to see more videos like this, more live videos, please do hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Make sure you hit the little bell next to it so you get notifications whenever these are going. Again, one more time, Pooja, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you. This was great. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you again. Yes, yes. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you on the next video. Take care.